Hello, welcome back, Handrawn here, and as promised, I will show you how I actually hand animate stuff, I guess. And these are some of my animations just here, and I'm going to show you how I did them or how I am doing them. So let's get into the smaller of the two first. Now first, you'll always want to have a hard surface to write on because you don't want to bend the paper. That's one thing. Some of mine are bent, but that's just because user error. But I think it's better if you have a flat surface. It just makes it easier to, once you're done, photograph them without any weird shadows or bends. And I just think it's better for the animation in general. To make these small squares, you'll want to take a piece of white paper. It can be any size, actually. You can make a poster board, or you can have just these standard printing paper. And then you want to measure 2-inch by 2-inch squares across the entire thing. It'll not be perfect. It is slightly longer on the top and the bottom, but you will get 20 2 by 2-inch squares on the standard printing paper. So you can make this was around 2.25, so 2 and a fourth of these papers, so not very much to make a pretty nice animation. Now, starting the drawing process is another whole thing in general, but it takes a lot longer than you'd expect because you have to do individual frames. The first thing I do is I create an idea. You want to have an idea before you start, because if you're just going off everything, you're just going off of your mind, just going and thinking as you go. That's what I'm trying to say. If you think as you go, it's not going to turn out as fluid. You're not going to have as good of an idea. You may not even know where to go next with your work. What I do is I create an idea, especially for these smaller tests, which are much easier to create ideas for, and then I start after I create the idea, instead of just going off of a whim. This is the starting point. So for this one, I wanted it to go up to the face in a spiraling pattern. And as you can see, it slowly does that over the entire 8-second animation, because I'm animating in 4s, or 6 frames a second. For this one anyway. And what I do to make it consistent, so it's not one's on this side of the paper and then you get the next frame and the boot's a whole inch to the right, or to the right. I put this on top of it and I trace the outline that I see. Now, this is a great method if you don't have a light table. But if you have a light table, it's much easier even, because you just put that on there and then you can easily see the outline. With this, I really just have to guess some of the time, because I don't have a light table, obviously. Those things are big expensive. So, yeah, we just have this. And as you start tracing, you're going to want to change it slightly from frame to frame. Some more extreme differences if you're going in less frames a second, but if you're going more frames a second, like animating in 1s, which is 24 frames a second, the standard, you'll want to animate a lot closer together frames, or at the very least, frames that are not too different from one another. And that makes a very nice animation in total, which I will show you right now. And that worked pretty good. Now, is it the best? No, but did I like doing it? Yes, and that was very fun. I liked seeing it come together, and that's one of the most important things, that you enjoy it. Now, let's show you how to do this. Or actually, we should probably explain color next. Now, color is slightly harder to do. For this, I actually just use a pencil I found on the floor once, so yeah, I don't get the perfect, but I think it is good. I use this very nice, actually, metal one that I found on the floor, so, and lead that I also found on the floor, so it's not the best, but it works. But for color pencils, or for coloring, you can do multiple options. You can use markered colored pencils, crayons, paint if you want to do like larger scale. You can do other things. Anything really. You can use gouache. You can use, I don't know, anything really that you really want. But I use colored pencils now. I would definitely recommend getting the entire thing done, or at least getting the majority of it done before you start coloring, because once you have it done, what I even did is I actually did one before I had color and one after I had color. Now this one obviously does have color, and that's the updated version, but I did it before and after, and I think that works well for me because I'm able to see if it turned out well, because I don't want to spend another probably hour or 2 hours for this anyway. It was about 2 hours of coloring if it didn't even turn out well. Sometimes I have to go in, make changes, so I don't want to do a bunch of frames and then color and then not be happy with it. So I just wait till the end. If you're happy with it, then go to coloring, which is what I do, and it looks great. For me, anyway. So, what I use is just the basic 50 pencil Crayola colored pencil thing. And you can find this for like $6, $7. So, it's cheap and very affordable. You can even just find pencils sometimes just on the floor, and that's what I use sometimes even. Like if I find a random colored pencil on the ground, I take it and I just use that instead because, well, I'm weird. But I do collect pencils, which is it aids me greatly when I need to refill my lead or I need to draw something. They just appear out of the woodwork. But that's what I use, just the basic 50 colored pencil kit from Crayola. Anyway, on to the larger animations. Now these are a bit harder, and they take a lot more time, they take a lot more paper as well. Now these are the ones I'm doing. I have a lot of them. I'm pretty sure I have total around 23 now that I'm working on, and this is just the work in progress thing and the disclaimer, which I used, but this is the most basic thing. So what I do, and this may not work for everyone, but for what I do, when I want to make a larger, more official animation, I'd say, I use this system to make them kind of more line up with the screen, which if you crop it after taking the picture, it can kind of line up a lot easier, a lot better than, say, one of these. But this takes a lot more, and I do it I don't have any actual measurement for this. I just go and get it done. With the first one, which is this one, I did measure, or I didn't measure even, but I just go off of this original one because I don't want to mess it up. So if you don't measure, I'd recommend going off the original and copying the length off of that one because you don't want it to be different across all your pieces. But yeah, no particular measurement, but I think this is, but I think this works for me, just doing this. And what I do is I don't take up the whole paper with just these 9 little frames, which are very good, but I do recommend doing 9 frames here, and then I recommend having this little bottom section open. Now, for this, I have the scene name and what will be going on in the scene, and then I have these, which could be better. I accidentally did them weird, very weird, so I have them in this direction when they should be going this direction. That's one thing I'd fix when I will do my next one, but for this one, I'm just keeping it consistent, doing all like this. It should be 1, 2, 3, because that's how I'm doing it, 1, 2, 3, and not 1, 2, 3 like that. But I think it works for me pretty good, and then once you're done, I'd say with a whole page. I wouldn't cut them out before you're done with the whole page. Also, having these still in the pages is good for just seeing, or good for not, again, wrinkling your paper. But once you're done, you can cut it out and you can photograph them and crop them and edit them if you have to. And then you'll finally have a finished animation, which I'll show you. I'll show you it now, what the test one was. Now, you may notice that that's a bit fast, and that's because it is not the complete thing. This is like a storyboard. Now, I would definitely recommend making a storyboard, especially if it's a longer animation. For shorter ones, not so much, but for really long ones, or even just a minute long one, you could probably use a storyboard to make it go smoother, and it works much better. For this, it was a storyboard. Obviously, it's not perfect, and it's not animated in fours or any animation really, but it turned out not too bad for a storyboard. Now, what the main thing you want to learn is how to know how many frames you're doing a second. Now, this is the system for doing it. The standard is 24 frames per second. Now, what you'd call a 1 or ones are full 24 frames a second. You can think about it as the number here being how many times you divide. You can divide 24 by this. So for fours, it would be 4, or 24 divided by 4, and you'd have 6 frames a second. 24 divided by 3, 8. 24 divided by 2, 12. And 24 divided by 1 is, of course, 24. And that pertains to the amount of frames you'll have in a single second. Now, for beginners, I'd say if you want to have a less fluid but more easy to draw, say it takes a lot shorter time to do fours than it does to take ones. What I do is usually fours, but you can definitely do twos or even ones as a beginner. It'll just take a little while. And of course you can go even smaller, though I definitely wouldn't recommend going much smaller than 5 frames a second, which is not one of these numbers specifically, but 5 frames a second is definitely the minimum, I would say. Maybe 4, but then after that, it's not going to look as good. So, basically, this is more fluid, this is less fluid, this is more time, this is less time, the standard is 24, and, well, it's going to take a while either way. I definitely just recommend doing 6s for a beginner because it takes less time and you get a result faster as you grow and you start to learn more techniques and things about it. I'd recommend going higher and higher, and especially if you're doing like a film, like a pilot or stop motion or anything really, I'd recommend going more frames. Okay, so now you're probably wondering, okay, so I have all this stuff done, and now I'm wondering, how do I photograph it? Now, this depends on what you use. If you have an actual camera, which I'm guessing a lot of people do now, I don't, but I'm guessing a lot of people do, or even just a phone. You can use a phone for this technique. Now this one, with a camera, it's much easier. You just lay it down, maybe on a white background, you photograph it, have it on a tripod even, so it's even, and then you have a little taped off area where you have the frame. Then you just have an easy picture to crop and edit, and then that's much easier. But what you'd have, if you have a phone or tablet, is you can make this setup. Now this is a crude design, it's not fully, I'd say, finished, but it works. Now this is pretty basic. You can make this easily. It uses toilet paper rolls, And I definitely recommend reinforcing these if you have a larger device like a tablet. But you have 2 layers of cardboard on top, one on the top and one on the bottom, and then you'll have white paper in the middle. Now, on the white paper, you want to measure this, the 2 by 2 inch piece. And once you fit it directly in there, and you outline it, you measure it, you're basically done with the main setup. And after you're done with this setup, you can start taking your pictures, which you cut a hole in here, and then you line it up. You can take your picture. You can turn flash on even if you want to have some light in there. And then you crop it, and then it will work good. You can actually easily make this setup, and this is what works for me. You can go like that if you don't want to have any. And this works for the larger frames as well. You just have to measure a bit larger. But I think this is a good way for me to do it anyway. Maybe not for you if you don't have like these basic supplies, or if you're using an actual camera. But for me, this is the way I do it. Anyway, once you're done taking all your pictures, editing them, cropping them, you have a pretty simple task to do. Or not too simple, but this is actually probably the least time-consuming part, which is editing them together. Now, depending on how many you actually have, it can be quite time-consuming, but for me, it took probably like less than 30 minutes to do this one, and it's pretty easy. You just have to think, how many frames do you have in a second? Okay, so if you're doing 6, you want to divide that 60 seconds, you want to divide a second, however much time is in a second. How did I forget this? But you want to do 16ths of a second for this. So that's a bit hard to do, but just, especially if you're using a better editing software, you can probably find the hundredths of a second, and you do 0.16 for how long each frame is on screen. Now for longer ones, you'll have to do the math on your own because I'm lazy, but then once you have them at the correct frame rate you want, and you have them at the correct length you want, you have them all put in there, you'll come out with a finished product. And that finished product can either look really good, or if you mess something up, it can look really, really bad. But once you're done, you'll turn out with something like this, which is this one that I showed you earlier. But, well, the same thing, but when it's finished, it should look pretty good. Okay, so looking at that again, you can actually count the frames now, and you can see how each one goes by pretty quickly, but not super quickly, because I used 4s, animated in 4s. Now, I think it's definitely not perfect, but I think it turned out very nice. Now, the one thing you'll notice is that I didn't go over any of the, 12 to 24 principles of animation, which I can do in another video, but that's going to take a lot longer because if I do that, I want to have actual examples, which will take a long time to do. But for now, that's actually the really basics of my way of doing things. Now, it may not work for everybody, but I hope it does work for some people, because I do it this way, and I think it turns out not too bad. So, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it inspires you to start animating, because it is very fun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.